Hey guys, this is Adam Menner, partner in the business of strength. This is the Varsity House Education Performance Podcast, the VHE Performance Podcast. And we are excited to present to you a guest, Jaclyn Sklaver. She is the founder and CEO. She's a registered CNN nutritionist, and she owns Athleat Nutrition. She works with everybody from Gen Pop to high school, all the way up to professional athletes such as Deontay Wilder and Tyron Taylor, the quarterback. And she has a lot of awesome insight here from not only her nutrition background, but also how she built her business and her awesome book of clientele. So you guys can check that out in this episode. She does a great job there. Also, don't forget Varsity House Education. We are offering a free week to all of our listeners. So if you guys are interested in the Varsity House Education platform, that platform is for coaches, trainers, and business owners in the private sector, where we teach you how to build your training principles and systems, and also how to build your business and some career development. It's an educational platform. We offer courses, we offer video presentations, a live coaches group. We also offer articles and research, and all guest appearances and projects that we have are in there. So we look forward to you guys joining us. If you have any questions there, you can click the link in the show notes below. But I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get started. Hey, Jaclyn. So what's going on? Welcome to the VH Performance Podcast. Why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll rock and roll.
Okay. My name is Jaclyn Sklaver. I am a licensed dietitian, nutritionist, specializing in sports nutrition. My educational background is in functional medicine, so I get to pull that into it a little bit. I am licensed in Florida and in New York. However, I can work in most states in this country. I'm currently based out of Miami. I was started up in New York and was there for most of my career, as well as Atlanta. But now I'm living the good life down in Miami.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because I think your approach to things is pretty unique. You know, we've connected before, and you mentioned just how you go about it and how detailed that process is. So I thought that'd be really cool to bring to light about what it actually takes, you know, and the value of your nutrition and your background and the integration of that into true health and performance. So, you know, kind of what led you to the way that you do it? Like, elaborate what you just said in terms of functional medicine, in terms of your backgrounds, and like, how did that form your ideology to kind of where you are now? So for people who don't know, Jaclyn works with some pretty badass people. So.
Yeah, I guess I didn't mention that. I work with active general population, but I also work with professional athletes. So I started with NFL. I've transitioned to also working with NBA. I just worked with a heavyweight boxing fight. You know, I'm Deontay Wilder's nutritionist. So I get to work with some pretty awesome athletes. Yeah. I just don't like, I don't know. I guess I don't talk about it like that.
Which is fine. But you know, yeah. I think it's cool for people to know, because you've been in those high pressure situations. You know, yeah, where there's a lot on the line, not just like, oh, I'm going to grade your food log for like Jill, you know, down the street.
Absolutely. And you don't even realize, I mean, of course I realize, you know, while I'm working with these athletes, how important things are, but man, until you really get there, especially with fights, there is fight week, heavyweight boxing championship fight is the most larger than life experience that you can ever imagine in your life. It was the coolest thing as well, but talk about details and pressure. And there was a lot that went on there.
Oh, sure.
So how I got to where I am, first of all, I'm very bespoke, you know, and throughout the years, people tell me, oh, you should scale your program, be so much easier. You can make all this money. And I said, like, my brain doesn't go there. I'm just very individualized and bespoke, because when it comes to nutrition, everybody's different. I can't even fathom giving you and your friend the same nutrition program. I just can't do that. And then when we start to dial things in for athletic performance, everybody's different and their metabolism is different, but then their lifestyle is very different. So when you have somebody who's got so much training going on and so much focus, you need to make something that's very complicated like nutrition easy, right? It has to be as easy as possible. So my job is to kind of take the background biochemistry science part of it and how can they execute this into their lifestyle? And that means really immersing myself into it. And then how can we optimize things? And that's where I go into a lot of biochemistry. I like to do detailed lab work on my clients, looking at their micronutrients, fatty acids, toxins, you know, whatever it may be. Having the functional background, I can really dive into as much testing as I need. I don't like to overdo things, but I do like to always get a good micronutrient and fatty acid profile and see what we're working with, because you never know. I mean, the most elite athletes in the world might have the most messed up things going on inside their body.
But well, they saw, sorry to cut you off. No, but And I want to ask more about that, but like I read like Derrick Rose, right? A great athlete. It's like he was like, yeah, I ate Skittles and like popcorn every day. And it's like you won the MVP, 2011 MVP doing that. So it's like I'm sure guys who are genetic freaks, right, are way different needs in terms of like an everyday individual. So like what's like if you could, what's your 3-step process if someone walked in the door and they were like, hey, I want to work with you, like what is that 3-step process? Yes, no one's the same, but it's like you have your system, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, first thing I need to know is what have you been doing? Why are you coming to me? Like, what is your, it's like it is a healthcare role, right? So like, what's your chief complaint? Because it's very rare that somebody comes to me and says, I'm doing great and I want to do even better. They've come to me. Unfortunately, it's a referral from a doctor, a surgeon, a physical therapist, a strength coach, somebody who's like, you know what, you're lacking in this area. It's your nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, what's your chief complaint? What do you want to work on? And then it's, what have you been doing? And then I sit down, I have to talk to them. I almost have to be a detective because they might not even realize other areas that nutrition can help. People don't realize how much I can do for them. So it's really an interviewing process of seeing how I can help them. And then sometimes I learn along the way. So I might just do what we discussed. Like, you may come to me and say, this guy's just not making it through his strength portion of his workouts. Right. And then, so we increase the food he's eating and we increase, what he's eating in between his conditioning and his strength. And he feels great and he feels better. But then as we start to do stuff, we see other areas that we can improve on as well. Some people may have gut health problems that people don't even know they're sick when they're so used to being sick, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
When you have inflammation in your gut as an athlete, inflammation leads up into your lungs, and clearing up any kind of stomach issues can clear up lungs. And there's so much to it,
Oh, for sure. And so like, what is the number one, let's say we'll take 2 different populations just because you do both, right? Yeah. So let's say person number 1, person A, if they're a high profile athlete or just like Deontay Wilder or an NBA and NFL person, what's the number one thing that you see wrong in their nutrition that inhibits their performance? Let's start there and then we'll go to the next person.
Under eating, nutrient time, going into workouts completely underfueled, not fueled at all. I mean, what are you working with then? Yes, you are elite and you can get it done, but let's be real, you need fuel. You still need fuel in the car. So I would say under eating and not fueling proper times. Yeah. Like literally going into workouts with 0 in the tank.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the most you can. A, you're risking injury. B, you could be getting so much more out of the time you're spending in the gym. You're spending time there and energy. Let's get the most out of it. And recovery. The one thing I learned, especially working with Deontay, because we were training so much, the faster you can recover, the more you can train, the better athlete you're going to be. And that's the name of the game. And recovery starts right away with fueling. As soon as you're done that workout, not like, oh, I'm going to drive home. I'm going to stop at Walgreens. I'm going to see my buddy. Maybe I'll eat dinner in 2 hours. No, it's immediate.
For sure. And this is something interesting too. Like, we've talked and we collect a lot of data here with some of, especially our high level athletes, and the lower it goes, I'm sure you can attest to this. They don't need as much because the demands placed upon them aren't as high, but the freak athletes, right? Their power output, their alactic ability is so high. Does that play a role in terms of like what they actually need? You just mentioned like your ability, right, to recover, almost like power endurance, repeated bouts of high output. So like what we've seen here is like these guys are so, whether it's like their peak power output when we measure on our force plates is so high, like from a nutrition standpoint, does that require even more fuel?
Absolutely. Especially when we look at power and, people think about, carbohydrates are for endurance athletes, but what they don't realize is like we deplete glycogen really quickly when we're doing quick spurts. When you're using an anaerobic, energy zone, like you are quickly running through your carbohydrates. So people don't relate that and how much they need that and how quickly they need to refuel. And you said something about lower level athletes, which I want to also touch on because I have been working with some high school athletes that their performance has changed so much. I kind of had a referral and now I'm like in this network of like cross country, football, quarterbacks, and swimmers. Their performance has changed so much, even in school, by dialing in their nutrition because you're in a growth process. Your body is growing and their output's really high too. And like kids that are 15, 16 years old, man, they can go all day.
For sure.
But if you are eating and you're at that point where, and also some of their body fat gets really low, you don't want to be 7% body fat as a 15, 16-year-old playing sports. You need that fat for nurturing. So it's not just at the elite level, the way that people are so anabolic into their teenage years makes it really important too.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm also, and we're going to talk about it a little bit, but I remember you said like eating for like almost like recovery from injury. and a lot of the athletes that I've worked with over the past have had some injuries experience. And you could, it's so many different things that play a factor, but I know nutrition is one of them. I know the increase in playing games is one of them. You talk like COVID was a leap year in the sense of you're not practicing, you're not playing. So the body's not prepared, for that, and you're depleted nutrition wise. So on that front too, like, how do you go about that process in terms of getting an athlete healthier? Is that require a different process than like performance, right? Because like health and performance not necessarily are mutually inclusive, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. And what some people don't realize is, so after you have surgery or injury or trauma to your body metabolizes substrates like your protein and micronutrients differently. Some foods that we didn't need to have because our body produced it itself, we now need to supply to our body. So there is actually a laid out process after surgery, like the first 2 weeks are very, very important. And how much protein you're eating, how many calories you're eating, your metabolism goes up because you're repairing tissue, sometimes bone, and people underestimate that. Now there's a psychological aspect to that because, hey, I was an athlete. Now I'm not working out. I'm kind of sitting around all day. I don't have any appetite. I don't want to eat and I don't want to gain weight. So there's that part of things. So we kind of go through a whole process where I'll lay out what, the first 2 weeks, basically the first 6 weeks. And then we change that a little bit because then they're going to start to do physical therapy, right? Yeah. So then we start to now ramp things up and we change it. So it almost looks like, if I could picture it was like high, then we'll start to like drop down a little bit and then we'll come back up. So it's the lifeline of recovery. And it depends on what was the injury. Was it soft tissue? Like I said, is it bone? Did they need surgery or not? How fast are they getting into physical therapy? Everyone's different. So there's a lot of nutrition aspect. And we know for a fact that we can increase recovery time from surgery upwards of 30%, like 30% faster. If you do the right thing, if you're giving your body the fuel and the nutrients it needs to repair, wow, it's going to repair faster.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, this is like Pandora's box, right? Because like you said, no person's the same, but let's say an athlete who experienced a soft tissue / tendon injury. So no like true muscular damage, no tear, no bone. What are 3 things that they could implement into their diet that would help speed up that recovery process?
Like I said, right then and there, you want to make sure that you are having enough protein. We need about 20% more protein at that time period. So the easiest way to do that is like, add an extra shake in the day. Yeah. And in that shake, throw in some collagen. And I think people should be doing collagen all the time anyway, but I think that's one of the areas that they definitely need. If you make sure if you have just, you pulled your hamstring and maybe you're doing light practice, you still this is time to think about what's going into your body. Anti-inflammatory diet overall, it should be implemented all the time. Take out the fried foods, take out the heavy creams, take out the Skittles and the processed stuff, and think about, well, how can I make these whole foods? Can I do berries and fruits instead of junk candy? Yeah. What can I do to give myself an anti-inflammatory diet?
For sure. And I think people don't realize, like you said, because right now I'm working with a lot of injured athletes, or they're coming home, they're getting surgeries and stuff like that. But leading up into that process now, it's not like an I told you so moment, but it's kind of like, guys, look, this is why this part of the equation had to have been taken seriously, because like you said, just the regeneration of tissue and tendon is obviously from that fuel source. And so, what's a good message, even because some athletes will listen as well, but like, what's a great message for, how you can build successful habits as it pertains to your nutrition for, health and performance?
I mean, I look at, when I make people their nutrition plan, I look at it as a blueprint, just like your training program, right? And you have to look at it as the same exact thing. So you have to look at it every day of, you're going to wake up and follow a set schedule and stick to it on the weekends too. The weekends are where people really go off, right? So just because you have a rest day doesn't mean that you can just rest what you're eating in your schedule. So obviously hydration, super important. It helps with your joints. It helps with all your cells. Like, wake up and drink 16 ounces of water, start with that. Low hanging fruit, right? Make sure every meal you have 16, 20 ounces of water. You should definitely be drinking water and electrolytes when you're training. But I think it's, sticking, like writing out a plan and sticking to it. Like, you have your schedule for training. You should have an eating schedule too. It's just as important.
And I think too, just getting on page with the parents is really important, just because I think to myself, like, all right, I'm working with some of the top high school players in the country right now. We work with some big basketball programs, and it's like, they would never miss a game, because they know they're going to get that AAU exposure. They know they're going to see all those things. But if you tell them like, hey, you just have to pack your meal, they're like, well, this is ridiculous, So it's like,
oh, that's the number one thing. Like, we all my athletes, I don't care. Listen, I work with some big NBA players. they have their cooler pack that I told them to get on Amazon. We're all carrying around the same thing. And trust me, none of them think it's dorky, because that $20 million contract isn't dorky.
Yeah.
You know, it sure isn't. You know, being able to play, 30, 40 minutes of a game is not dorky,
Yeah.
you know? So it's like, you do what you got to do. And if you see it from the top, I've never worked with a pro athlete that was like, I'm not doing that.
Oh, for sure. And it's also too, because I think like the level of seriousness, like you just said, plays a role, right? Like middle school, I'm a kid, whatever. High school, okay, the stakes are higher, but like I kind of have this freedom. And then it's like, wow, I need to play college. I need to get a little bit more serious. Now I'm trying to make millions. Like you said, I'll do whatever it takes. But we got to instill that into them, from a high school level.
And if you think about it, it's really starting from a young, and also, well, there's two things. First of all, from your high school level, you're trying to get that college scholarship. From college scholarship, you're trying to go pro or something, and so it should be taken serious there. And if you start like these 15, 16-year-old guys and women that I'm working with, they have such an advantage because
Oh my gosh,
even
yeah.
if college, or say they do go into a pro area, man, they've got like 10 years of experience of how to fuel their body on top of people that are now, you are say you're in college, you're so busy, you've got school, you've got the sport, or if you're pro, like you don't have time to think about what you're eating, you're just doing, you're not really learning. Sometimes people want to learn, but usually they're just following the plan I do. When you're younger, you can sit there and kind of understand it and take the time to learn it.
Yeah.
And injury too. I tell people, if you're injured and you're not training all day, take the time to understand what's going into your body. It doesn't take that much time.
Right.
You can really learn right now. Within a week, you could start to really understand what's going on here.
Do you talk to parents a little bit? Like, do you build relationship with the parents of these kids and athletes?
When I do any high school, the parents are on the Zoom calls with me, because they're the ones that are feeding them, and they're the ones that sought me out, and they're interested, and they want the best for their kids, and they want to know what to do. They're the ones cooking for them. I don't think I have any athletes that really, high school athletes that are cooking for themselves, realistically.
No, usually it's like the mom gives them $20 for lunch and then they just do whatever.
Yeah, no, my kids all bring lunch to school, and they have to eat, we get permission from the teachers or the coaches. If you're a football athlete, you get to eat whenever. If you're a track athlete, you need permission, which is pathetic. If you're a woman, gosh, you got to you need to write a letter to the principal that you need to eat. It's so pathetic. But we get them to do it. And we're like, listen, so-and-so needs to eat at 12:30 and at 2:30 and
Yeah. And that's, again, just communication, right? Good communication equals good results just on all parties, There's two things that you said though that I want to talk about. One is the in-game nutrition. I think that just can't be stated enough. So let's say it doesn't really matter. Like, what are your things for in-game nutrition? Like, what should they have before games, intra-game, and post-game to ensure that their performance is high?
Everyone's different in how soon before game or a meet they need to eat. But I would say on average, an hour before the game, you need to have a decent amount of protein and carbohydrates in your body. And so what does that look like for you? Like, are you in school and that's something that's cold? Is it like you have to bring a sandwich and pretzels and some fruit with you, and maybe do a fruit juice? Or can you do something warm, like a rice bowl with chicken? Are you at home? And then for the rule of thumb is for every hour that you're exercising or training, you need about 30 more carbs. So how are we going to get that in, depending on your sport? If you're swimming, that has to go into your water. If you're running, it might be able to be a gel or goo, or it could be maybe, the honey stinger waffles or a fig bar. It all depends on your sport. If you're doing a performance sport like football or basketball, you kind of get a 10-minute break. You can eat something in between that.
So you're saying like at halftime almost?
Well, if we're talking about an actual game, yes. At halftime, we're refueling. There's no question about that.
Okay.
If we're talking, I was thinking about like practice, because practice is like 2 hours easily,
right,
and sometimes longer. But if you're in an actual game, you can't go a whole game. And like I said, these fast sprints that they're doing in games, you're using up your carbohydrates so quickly.
For sure.
Is that just, and I'm not a huge fan of Gatorade. There's other things out there, but sometimes Gatorade does come in handy because it's easy and you could just take a swig of it. But there's other carbohydrate powders out there too. But is it just that, quick swig of carbohydrates? Because we know even just like a mouth rinse of carbohydrates can get your glycogen back up. And then post game, it's like the most important time. I mean, as quickly as you can get carbohydrates into your body is as soon as you're going to recover. So does that mean keeping like crackers in your locker and having that and then having a big meal? Maybe, that everyone's a little different, but you can't wait hours. People always stress if you're in the bodybuilding world, it's like anabolic window, but I'm not worried about an anabolic window. I'm worried about getting carbohydrates into your body so that you could start the repair process more.
For sure. What about like a small protein shake and like a banana after you have a game? Or is that like, what do you recommend? Like, what's the go-to?
You could do that, but is that practical? Does everyone have access to that is the question.
For
It's
sure.
like, what can you take in your locker, in your gym bag that can go into the locker room that you're going to have right away? And
Right.
it just depends where you're at, what level you're at, what food they're providing. Some teams might have fruit afterwards for you. I know that in a pro level, especially with football, they've been eliminating that traditional, fried chicken and wings and stuff like that after games. That was a very popular, nurturing, congratulatory meal. And I know a couple of years ago, like the Jets dietitian took that away and my guys were complaining. And I said, like, no, that makes so much sense. The last thing you want to do is go eat fried food after you
Yeah,
just worked so hard. It's the last thing you want to put into your body.
for
So
sure.
I think if you're at a level where you're packing for yourself, yeah, I mean, I like the core power shakes. Sometimes I throw them in my bag, but it's not just the protein, it's also the carbohydrates. And so what type of carbs do you want to eat after? Is it fruit for you? Is it, like I said, is it a fig bar? Is it a Belvita bar? Are you making a homemade granola bar maybe? It depends on what level of
Yeah, for sure. And I
you
think
want to
that's
be.
important too. Like you're making a good point. It's like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just like the consistency and adhering to it, which
There's
is,
different levels. I mean, of course, we'd love everyone to have homemade, granola bars with rolled oats and fresh dried dates and stuff, but it's not realistic. So it just depends on where you're at and what level you can be at with that stuff.
for sure. And then the second thing though, that you brought, and I know you're passionate about this, and is there a true difference, and I've read some things, but obviously you're the pro. Is there a true difference between the way that men and women should eat in terms of like for their structure, for the hormones and stuff like that as it pertains to performance? Or is it just to be like, this is how it is?
I mean, not really. I think where things really come into play is when we start looking at hormonal changes and,
For sure.
and like perimenopause and stuff. And people aren't in, like, I work with tons of women that are very active at that level, but you're not in like your career of being an athlete at that point. So I'm not that concerned. I do think that in the teenage years, that's when our bones are forming and we're going to decide our bone strength in our 40s and 50s when when in our teenage years. So it's very important that women are paying attention to that. And it's not just getting enough calcium and all all the minerals that you need, but it's also eating enough calories. So
Yeah.
if you're under eating and your energy availability is too low as a high school athlete, as a female, that could catch up with you in your 40s and your bone mineral density is going to be low because you under ate. So I think that's the one thing we want to stress. I mean, as much also with men, but women are starting their reproductive years. So that will inhibit our reproduction too. So it's more important to really stress that with women, but men also need to be getting enough calories in,
Oh,
energy availability. And now it's called REDS. It used to be like the female athlete triad. Well, now we've included men into that because we need to make sure that men are included in eating enough. I personally see more body image issues with male athletes than I do with women. They just don't talk about it to other people.
oh yeah. And you could definitely see that, I'm sure. Because it's interesting, like from a training standpoint, when you look at like hormonally, and we talked about output, like just females from a neurological and hormonal standpoint, they don't have the same output required in terms of like, you look at force production. If a girl's lifting, we like to take smaller jumps with females just because, again, with a male, if I have a 220-pound linebacker, it's like, okay, I know I could go 135, 185, 225, because I know that their neurological output can match that external load. But with like females, I see a lot of intent issues in the sense of like, they can't just make that aggressive jump when they're detrained. And so
Yeah.
from a nutrition standpoint, I'm wondering like, yes, they need to eat enough, but like, do they need the same supply if it's not matching like the energy demand that they're being placed upon, if that makes sense?
I mean, unfortunately, most of our research has not been done on women, and there
Yeah,
are some researchers that are starting to do that. And it's still such a mystery because it's so varied in the research and we don't have like meta-analysis. We don't have a ton of data. And they are looking at like training around your menstrual cycle. And we do know that certain times of the month, your body uses different substrates differently, but how important is that in the big picture? And once again, I feel like everything has to be simplified.
for
So
sure.
first, let's work on basics. And then if you tell me like you are doing everything 100% and you want to dial in your nutrition around your menstrual cycle, then I'll consider that. But we have
Yeah,
a
that makes
lot
sense.
of other things to work on. So hopefully in the, I don't know, next 10 years, there'll be more and more research done on women and we'll know more about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really important, Switching gears a little bit though, just in terms of where you are to your career, I think this is super important because a lot of times other coaches look at the final product of like, wow, look at her business, look what she has, look at her clientele. But like you talk a lot about this, the building years to get there, and what that takes is. So how did you kind of start your business? Where were you? And how did you kind of make that ascension process to where you are now?
Yeah, I've always been into nutrition and fitness, and I was intimidated by it in undergrad. Like I was so scared by the sciences and biochemistry, so I didn't do that in undergrad. And about 10 years ago or 8 years ago, I decided to go back to school. I was living in Manhattan, and just to go back to grad school for nutrition, it was such a passion of mine. And I did that, and I didn't realize at the time what that would mean as a sacrifice in my life living in Manhattan.
I'm sure.
Got my personal training license and left like a cush job to like, I was doing the hustle, training people in the mornings in Manhattan, going to grad school for nutrition, having a tutor, because just because I was older didn't mean biochemistry. If anybody's ever interested in studying nutrition, just know that you're actually studying biochemistry. You know, it's it. It's all biochemistry.
That's what the best say. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Which you fall in love with. You have to. I do love it. And so I was going to school in Connecticut, but then I saw this internship opportunity on like a Facebook page to do an internship with NFL Combine down in Atlanta. And I answered it, and they're like, sure, we'll take you on, but you know, you got to pay your way, and you know, we don't have housing or anything. So I literally got an Airbnb down in Atlanta, Airbnb my place in Manhattan, and went down there. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And I moved down to Atlanta. So for 2 years I was down there, but I was still flying to New York for grad school, totally broke, you know, just doing what I had to do. And working, I guess I would say being in that environment, showing up every day, showing these guys, all these athletes that like, I knew what I was doing, and them telling me like, wow, you know more than my team dietitian. I've been in the league for 8 years. I've never met anybody who knows as much as you, because that's all I did. I immersed myself in that. And they started to trust me, and they started to hire me. And so a lot of that was built on trust. And that's kind of where the NFL thing started to flow. Yeah. And then working with general population also, I had to get back to New York. I mean, that's just where business is, right? You know, so I moved back to New York, but then I had an opportunity to do some combine stuff in January 2020 in South Florida. So went down there for a couple months, and when COVID hit, I was like, all right, I guess I'm staying down there. But a lot of what I did, even in New York City as working in nutrition, was referral based, right? It's all referrals. All the trainers knew that if they needed help with nutrition, they could come to me. And so it was all getting those high-end clientele through referrals, and then through NFL referrals, and then through making relationships with other trainers and coaches like yourself, physical therapists. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I mean, it's a lot, I made it sound a lot easier than what it was.
For sure.
It was a lot of, you know, I'm 40, about almost 43. I'm single and I don't have kids. And I don't think that I would be able to do that if I did. That's the truth of the matter. And that's why you don't see as many women in these positions, because you have to sacrifice your life. I had to go, like, if I had to go to Atlanta, I was in Atlanta. If I had to fly every weekend to New York, I did. If I had to go down to Florida, I did. So you have to, you know, or I've had to put that on my forefront, you know? And so a lot of that is like, right now I'm in Oklahoma City, you know, I get up and go. So
I think, and it's just the willingness. Like a lot of people know what they want, but they're not willing to align like what they want with like their lifestyle in terms of like the core values, if you will. And that's a lot of things that people don't talk about, where it's like, yeah, I want to be one of the best, but like, are you actually willing to do what it takes? Take even like your knowledge out of it. Because the knowledge is like, I don't want to say it's universally accessible, but it is almost to an extent. But there's just people who are just willing to go that extra length.
It is. And you have to, like, my entire life is really driven by my career and what I've had to do, and be uncomfortable and be alone. And like, Atlanta was a great city, but I didn't have any girlfriends there. I was alone a lot. My life, even just going. So I went to Summer League this year for the first time by myself. And that was a decision. You know, it was like, okay, am I going to go get on an airplane and go and just I'm just going to put myself there. I'm just going to do it. You know, I started working with some guys that did draft prep, and I felt like I belonged there enough, but I still had to go into that MAC building and go in there as one of the only women and watch those games and network with people and meet people by myself in Las Vegas, you know, and I did that at NFL Combine too. So you have to get out of your comfort zone and just do it, you know. Sure. And also being like in grad school a long time, every dollar I made went right into my business. So I didn't have any investors. It was a lot of uncomfortableness. You know?
Sure.
So.
Yeah. And like, but let's talk about that. Like, what was like the initial start of the business? So like, was it business, grad school, business is thriving, or was it kind of like grad school, then you built your business and now it's kind of where you are now?
Being in New York City, and like I said, having that relationship with other trainers and always being interested in nutrition and having done it before I finished grad school, I was lucky. I had like a nice base, and I had people that were already coming to me. But then it started when I moved to Atlanta, like my income just like flatlined, because I didn't realize moving to Atlanta, I don't know anybody here. I don't have a network of referrals. I don't have people. So that was rough. I mean, honestly, I Airbnb'd my place in New York City, and that paid my rent in Atlanta and in New York. and got me food, but I still had to like put food back on the shelves. I still remember the day that I could go to a supermarket and not have to worry about putting food back on a shelf. So although I did have a base of business, it just was different in Atlanta. And then the day I moved back to New York and I ended up graduating and like getting my licensing like a few months later, everything just started to take off from there. It was almost like everybody was just waiting for me. And it's true. I have people I work with to this day that refer me that say, Jack, I knew you were going to be great. I was just waiting for you to have the credentials so I could say, okay, you know, this is who you should work with and have that, because the doctors are referring you. They want to make sure you're licensed and stuff.
Oh,
so,
of course. Yeah.
so people, it was a lot of building relationships, even in Atlanta, networking. You know, I did a program called Atlanta Women in Sports, and we did a lot of stuff with Super Bowl. And it was just about networking and meeting the right people and showing up, and a lot of stuff you don't want to do, but just being in that one room and meet one person, you never know where that's going to take you.
For sure. And obviously you're a savage, but in terms of the confines of your business, for people who are solopreneurs, what do you recommend in terms of, what's the best way for managing your time? Do you have an assistant, things like that? Because we talk to a lot of coaches that are solopreneurs that think they can do it themselves. And obviously your model is a little different, but what are some of those things that have helped you to kind of keep going? And it's not scale, but it's organize your business so you can serve more.
I think a lot of it, I do have a virtual assistant. I'm still learning how to delegate. It's hard, especially
we talked about that before.
Yeah. Like things have to come out of my brain and, you know, what can I delegate out? But organization. And for me, it's like, God, I got to stay off social media. I have to allot that to like a certain amount of time of the day. And I just like write out my schedule. I know that I take all of my client check-ins are on the same day. I do all of my discovery calls. I try to keep within the same hours, you know, so I try to structure that schedule as much as I can. Having to travel throws that off. But for instance, I flew into OKC at midnight last night so that I could sit in a hotel all day until I see my athletes tonight and work. Now, had I gone the other way around, I'd be flying all day today. So you have to be so efficient with your time. And so it's really scheduling out and being efficient. And I think that if people can delegate and get assistance, that's the best way to do it. You know, it's hard. It's hard to trust somebody with your baby and think they're going to do things right too.
And that's the thing though, like you're like, I do this the best, so I don't want this person. But I think, and you're doing this, but it's like you come to the realization, it's like, well, they don't do what I do. They just help take ancillary things off my plate. That's capturing my attention, you know, that allows me to focus on what I'm really, really good at. And it's hard for people, like you just said, to be like, I need to let this go when you've just spent so much time building something like that. So
one of the things that takes a lot of time for me is I source out chefs in different cities, and sometimes it's a last minute thing. So as much as I'm a huge planner and I try and plan out, you never know what's going to happen. I can get a call today and like, hey Jack, so-and-so is going to be for 1 week in Oregon and we need a chef. And I'm like, Jesus, that's hard to find. And I'm busy. I have other things on my plate. So I've learned to teach my assistant what to look for, what places, the things like the steps I would take. And then she can send me who is available. Because like if I need someone to start cooking today at a high level, like not everyone's available. So that was one thing that I took off my plate. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes when it does happen, it could take a lot of time. So things like that, it's not that she has to get into my brain for biochemistry, but she just needs to understand how to source out a certain level of assistance.
For sure. And the thing that you it sounds like you're saying a lot is just like, I don't think people realize is like availability. Like you're just always available. It's like being it's just like being an athlete on your team. Like I play all 82 games of the year. I come to all my practices. I do all these things. It's just like, I'm always available. I can help you. I can fly here. I can do these things. And I think that's what makes you also so enticing. You know, it's not just like, oh, I only do it on these days or I'll just come here. You know, eventually you'll have to probably slow down, but I think your success was predicated on your availability.
Yeah, part of it. And that's why I call it like a concierge service at that level. You know, I also work with a sports medicine doctor, and he's the only other person I know who hustles as hard as I do. So sometimes he's in LA, Milwaukee, Atlanta, all in like 2 days. But that's what we have to do. And you're right. It's people know that we're going to be there. I traveled to Alabama every single weekend for 8 months. You know, I didn't have my weekends, and that was just part of what I did. But you have to be in person. You have to be there to, you know, to hold people accountable sometimes. I feel like my mom always says to me, well, what do you do when you go there? I'm like, yeah, there's a lot to do. You know, you're showing up, you're part of the team, you're meeting with the other coaches, you're meeting with the chef, you're showing your athletes that you're a part of their selected team, you know, and that I think that's important to show up.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Because that's going to be the separating factor. When I call X, there's sometimes there. When I call her, she's always there. It's like no brainer, you know, and like you said, building those relationships. obviously you're very intelligent, but I think those relationships that they have and that trust factor and the availability is what puts you over the top on that front.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, trust is everything, right? You have to get trust from people. I don't care what level you're at. People need to, especially because I'm telling them what's going into their mouth and their body.
Yeah.
If they don't trust me, they're not going to listen. And making these huge lifestyle dietary changes is not just going to happen unless somebody trusts me.
No, for sure. So what's one line, it could be a fragment, but what's one line of advice that you would give a new aspiring nutritionist who really wants to take that next step and work with the next level of players?
I didn't see that on the questionnaire, so I'll give you 1 second to think about that.
All right, that's why we're here.
Yeah. I think that the number one thing is that you just have to keep going. No matter what, you're going to feel like you are kicked, punched down, falling backwards. You have to keep going. And it's so normal to feel that way because it's not easy to get there. Nobody just woke up and was where they wanted to be. And people are going to hate on you. They're going to try and hold you back. Surround yourself by people who want to lift you up, the people who are doing things that you want to do, even if you're the person in the room that knows nothing and you're like, me, be that person until you keep growing and growing. That's the most important thing. It's like the people around you. And you got to just keep on going. There's going to be days where you might want to cry. You got to keep on going.
Yep, for sure. All right, switching gears here. So this is something fun we do, just a little sports segment at the end here, little Q&A, rapid fire. You could elaborate on it a little bit because I kind of want to hear Deontay Wilder story.
Okay.
But let's just start here. Most athletic individual you've ever worked with?
I mean, Deontay's definitely athletic in so many levels. I work with Tyrod Taylor. He's very, very athletic as well. So I would say probably the two of them.
Cool. And what makes them so unique though? Like, is it just like, what athletic quality do they have? Not just like, oh, they work hard. Like, what's just something that you're like, oh, wow, like that's crazy.
Well, I mean, if you've ever seen Deontay spar or just, we were doing shakeouts in Vegas in the hotel room and you're just like, wow, man, this guy's got so much power. And when you think about boxing, it's like, your focus, your brain, your power, there's so much going on, the cueing. And so, I mean, that takes so much athletic ability. And that kind of translates over probably to why I find Tyrod to be so interesting too, because in a quarterback position, it's your brain is going. Mm-hmm. And when your central nervous system, it's like, it's not just about muscle. It's not just about being fast and running and catching a ball. You have so many decisions to make so quickly. And to me, that just is like mind blowing. I'm just like, wow, the decisions they make, the power that's going on, there's so much going on around you. And especially with boxing, I mean, there's so much going on, and you see that, sure. It's just mind blowing to watch it.
I think seeing it in person too is what's cool. You're just like, whoa.
Yeah.
Because people see like the end result, they're watching a game, but like when you're actually there in the room with them, I bet you it's just totally different.
And then that actually goes back to why people say, oh, why do you have to go there in person? I have to watch my athletes train. What I learn by watching them, because I'm so observant, I could see them run through energy systems. And I could see when they get tired. I could see where their brain's going. And that teaches me so much about how I need to program for them.
Yeah.
So if that means I have to fly out to wherever I'm at and watch them train, it's what I have to do because that's how it makes it unique and we hone things in. So I just had to throw that in there.
No, but it's true. It's true. All right. Smartest person you ever worked with, maybe like an individual coach, a doctor, somebody that you learned from that was just eye-opening.
There's so many, I've been around so many great doctors or professors, PhDs in nutrition. It's hard to pick one person. I feel like I'd be leaving people out.
Give me just three.
But I mean, I work with Dr. Elamine, and he's a sports medicine doctor that I work with and who, brought me in on Deontay. And, not just is he one of the smartest human beings, but he also the way that he doesn't make you feel like you're not as smart as him. You know what I mean? That's so important because there's a lot of arrogance that goes on in our industry.
Oh my
and
God. You're
around these people and the way they talk to people, you're like, what are you even talking about, bro? I don't even understand what you're saying.
Right.
So I think it's really important. I love to be around him and learn from him and learn business from him too. There's so much. So he's super, super smart. I'm trying to think of sometimes I listen to podcasts, there's doctors in functional medicine where I just love to listen to them and hear them teach and where their brain goes with things. I don't know. I feel like I could get back to you.
Believe it, that's one.
Yeah.
That's all I needed. All right. What are you currently reading right now?
I actually just finished Tim Grover's book, the winning book. And so now I'm ready for a new book. So if you have a book suggestion, do you have anything?
Yeah, I could send you some stuff.
Okay. I try to do some light reading because I'm always in this like deep biochemistry world of
Yeah, for
studying and
sure.
research.
One thing every coach I talk to, they'll never read like fiction books ever. Like, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like, when's the last time you're going to be like, yeah, I just bought a James Patterson, novel, and
never.
I'm just going to sit down? Like, never. I've never read a fiction book in my life except for like Catcher in the Rye. And,
I mean, I try to get myself off the screen.
yeah,
So, and in
yeah.
Florida, I like to have my beach reading or my pool reading. But I also like to do meditation a lot now when I have some free time. So I'll kind of put in a guided meditation for 20 minutes and try to get my brain to decompress for a little bit.
Which is like normal because like it's still like rejuvenating what you're good at, but it's just like there's just no ancillary bull crap that goes in your system, like no books, fiction book. It's just like no coach who's really serious about their stuff,
I
ever
can't
reads it.
imagine reading a fiction book. Yeah, that would be like a waste of time to
And
me.
that's what I'm saying. Exactly. All right. Where do you see the industry going in the next 10 years?
I would love to see it, and where I do think it's going, and we're coming, a lot of bigger athletes are putting more stress on how important nutrition, how important having certain coaches are, and taking care of your body, and the fascia system, and biochemistry of nutrition. And I think this more personalized, bespoke programming, and stressing more on recovery. And you see the biometrics that are going on, right? So we have the whoops, and then we have these blood sugar monitors and stuff. People are starting to pay attention to how your body responds to outside stimulus. So hopefully it's going to grow in that sense, but I don't want technology to take over humans. And I've
I'm
kind of
just
had
gonna
this
say, yeah,
the company levels is the continuous glucose monitor. I spoke with their VP a few times giving them feedback, and I'm like, you can't give people this data and not give them a human to explain it to them. It's not fair.
no,
And so people have to understand that the data can't take over the human coaching, but maybe it can put more importance on why we are important to you, why you can't do it on your own, because it's very complicated.
for sure. And it's almost, you just miss the human eye component of it. Such a simple analogy, but it's like if you've coached thousands of athletes, tens of years, yeah. And it's like you see an individual squat and you're like, well, I use a 4-stack. I can see this, that, and the other. It's like, yeah, but I've seen 10,000 box squats. You just can't remove that from somebody's, plate. So I think technology we use a lot, but it's also, you don't want to let it override, the human's ability.
I mean, and that's like research, people, that's kind of a difference between me and some other, and I'm not an RD, I'm a CNS, which is still at my master's degree in nutrition. I'm licensed, but it's a different mindset of, 8 grams per kilogram to this and that. And I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. I have guidelines from my research, but I'm working with human beings. And what have I seen? What's going to work? What do I know is going to actually be the best? So yes, of course I have a scientific background in the guidelines I go by, but it's about my experience and it's about their lifestyle and how we apply it.
Yeah,
can't just go by the book. That doesn't work. They're humans.
For sure. All right. Where can people find you? What events do you have coming up? And what services do you offer for people who are going to listen to this as well?
Yeah, sure. So I do work with the active general population. My one rule is like, you have to be active. You have to be working out, and have some type of goal. It could be, hey, you just raised 2 kids and now you're ready to get your body back. And you want to start lifting weights. I love working with women like that too. Or, hey, you've been doing CrossFit for 5 years, you've reached a plateau and you need to dial in your nutrition. And so as long as you're active, I work with active population. We do coaching together. Usually it's like 3 or 6 month program. And I teach you how to eat for your life, and then I also do like one-offs with high school or mostly like high school kids where we'll do an hour together. Then we'll do like a follow-up afterwards. We get on Zoom and we kind of lay out a blueprint for you. And so a lot of the high school kids like that and their parents. And then college is where it's like sometimes college parents come to me, but, I would say it's probably my least amount of population just because of where they're at with everything. And they're in the dining hall. And then, I work with pro athletes obviously as well. And I do that on like a 6 or 12 month basis. It's a year round thing. Sometimes I'll do like a small off season with them, but usually I try to integrate it because nutrition's not a 3-month thing.
No, definitely not.
So, and I'm flexible. I can build things out too. If someone says, listen, I just need to learn how to eat after my injury, we can do that as well.
So where could people like email you or just get in contact with you if they wanted to work with you?
So my number one thing is like, I put a ton of educational information out on Instagram, and it's Athleats Nutrition, spelled ATHLEATS, like eats, like my shirt, Athleats Nutrition. And then, my website is athletesnutrition.com, and you can schedule a discovery call there. You can email me through that. But I try to put out a lot of educational content on my Instagram as well. So I always tell people to check that out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it was awesome having you. I appreciate it a lot. Thanks for coming on, and obviously we're going to share this with a lot of different people. So thank you.
Thank you.